What worked for one person in business may not work for you in business. We're talking today about the power of nuance and how to wade through bad advice to get to the good advice that you can actually apply to your business today. Hey, if you're a first-time listener to the show, my name's Blake Benz. I'm the host of the Good Advice Podcast, and you come to the place to learn how to do actionable, practical things in your business to grow and scale. No fluff on today's show, just the stuff that's actually working. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about this concept of understanding that there's not a rule book that you can apply to every business, and you should always be nervous or at least a little suspicious of someone who claims that there is just a pick up in place rule set or guide or thing that will always work, because businesses are simply much more complex than that. Before we dive into today's show, here's a quick ad from one of the businesses that supports the podcast. Don't forget, you can also support the podcast yourself on our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice. Check out this ad. We'll be right back. There's one single piece of advice that I give to business owners who are ready to scale their business drastically. And that's knowing exactly what you need to hand off so that you can continue focusing on what you're an expert in. It amazes me when I talk to business owners who are doing their own bookkeeping and tax prep, and worse, that they're going through all this paperwork at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, even midnight, slaving away trying to make sense of all of the numbers for their business. Business owners who are making it happen have already figured out that you can't do it all yourself. That's why I recommend Steve Lay with Equity Business Solutions. Not only is he an expert in bookkeeping and tax prep, but what I love about Steve is that he'll sit down with you and help you make sense of the value of your business beyond just reading a spreadsheet. You'll be able to make better decisions, and more importantly, you're going to save yourself the crucial time you would have spent going through QuickBooks or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is that keeps us up late at night. So save yourself some time and some money by giving Steve Lay a call at Equity Business Solutions, and he'll show you the value beyond your numbers. Go to equitybusinesssolutionsllc.com to find out more. So the reason that I got into today's episode today is I've been working through my doctoral program, which I've been in my doctoral program for almost a decade now. I think a decade, actually. Yeah, looking at the calendar, yeah, about 12 years. So that's a long time to be working on a degree. My advisor said this last semester that I think he said I was his longest running student, which I wish I could say I'm proud of. Unfortunately, I am not. I started my degree before I got into my career post being a teacher. So I was a high school teacher for a few years and went into my doctoral program right after that. I won't get into the details. I mean, it's mostly boring stuff, but I thought I was going to be, stay in education. I didn't stay in education. I got a full-time job in the consulting world, and I could never just get enough of my attention back to the degree in a meaningful way. Having said that, I am rapidly moving towards trying to finish this degree. And one of the articles that my advisor had sent me was something called When What's Worked Doesn't Work. And he and I were in a conversation today about this. I've been reading some stuff about this concept. It's got me thinking a lot about business today, mostly because the premise of this article is, and this is all through like the lens of education and research, stuff like that. So when I was a high school teacher, you would have different initiatives that would be tried. They would be brought in by some usually outside consultant, and it would all be about, how do you help your kids learn better? Or if we're being really candid, how do you get your kids testing better? And how do you bring those test scores up? And I would have, there'd be any number of meetings that I would go to hosted by some outside person that would be like, hey, this is, we're taking, and just for the sake of the example, a ridiculous example, this is how scientists build rocket ships to fly off into space. They have this very, intelligent, science-driven, data-driven approach to it. And here's like their 18-step method for building a rocket. And if you take this same 18 steps and apply it to your students, you will see your test scores go up. You will see your students outperform, and it's all going to be great. So, you would have this rhythm in the education world around picking up things that worked elsewhere and trying them in your classroom with seemingly very smart people being like, hey, if we just do these things, it worked here. So naturally it should work, in your class. Unfortunately, you would eventually get to the point where someone would say, what the heck does building rocket ships to the moon have anything to do with teaching low income students in downtown Houston, Texas? What do these two things have anything to do with one another? Apparently, part of the premise of this article was on how medical schools and how doctors approach diagnosing their patients and just the process for helping people who are sick get better, and how this approach to deduction and scientific theory, how that could then be picked up and placed in the education world, yada yada yada. And by the way, as I'm talking through this, none of this is like far fetched. Like there's nothing necessarily wrong with looking at what has worked in one place and asking the question, is there anything analogous to that? Is there anything that we can pair with that to see what kind of insights, what kind of hidden insights there might be that we're not realizing for our business? Unfortunately, what has more often happened is that our approach to strategic thinking has been replaced with these sort of widgetized pick up and place playbooks, for lack of a better phrase. Like these, we've sort of bucketed these things into very simple, basic forms. And then we've tried to pick up those things and apply it to, frankly, what is incredibly complicated, which is running a business, working with people, working with customers. And there's nothing easy about any of this. There's nothing easy about running a brand. It doesn't mean that, that you don't have like a direction forward or you don't have an insight as to where you're heading with your business. But I feel like anytime there's people involved, there is complication there, or there's at least an affinity for complexity. Just because people they are, not want to say erratic, it's not the right word. You just can't always account for the human element in the equation. The way this played out for me was my story working in inner city Houston. We had this guy who came in, again, outside consultant, who was, I think he was part of like the Harvard Business School, or like was this esteemed professor. And he had an entire economic plan around what has worked in the economic world, and how these concepts can then be picked up and applied to education. Now, this led to this initiative where, out of all the schools in Houston, Texas, there were 4 schools that were chosen to be part of this pilot program. I probably, without even realizing I was going to go this direction, I joked earlier about, taking what the approach that scientists have done with like rocket ships and applying it to school. Well, funny enough, this program was called the Apollo program. And it was called the Apollo program because there was all this like marketing buzz around, we're taking these schools where where schools where education has never gone before. And, we're pioneering, and we're, making these changes that are controversial, but they're going to make a big difference. And some of these changes were like a longer school day, for example. So the school day started at 7:30 and it went till 4:30. That was like actual time in the classroom. So really you had to be there. You had to report for duty. Some people, really like to push it a little bit, but about an hour beforehand, you're typically there. So 6:30, 7 o'clock maybe. And you're typically staying after to meet with students or tutor or what have you. So the average workday then is, you're talking 6:30 to probably 5:30. It's a long day. And that's every day, by the way. This was my first job out of college as a high school teacher. And suffice to say, it was wild. It was incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging. And unfortunately, it didn't work. That program is no longer a program in Houston. I don't remember how much longer it lasted after I left that school. I was at that school for about 3 years, but bottom line, it didn't work. Though, not to be cynical, the superintendent at the time won like superintendent of the year, like out of all the superintendents in the country. I mean, there was a lot of pizzazz and definitely some marketing love given to this whole program that I think probably mischaracterized its success at the time. The point being, just because something worked in one place doesn't mean it will work somewhere else. I bring this up because wherever you are in your business, you are, everyone's at a different stage in their business. You could be just starting out. Um, you're just starting out, maybe getting your first sales. Maybe you're a little bit more farther along. You've got your customer base and you're thinking about scaling the brand. Maybe you're in the process of scaling. You have a number of people working for you and you're thinking about what's next. You're thinking about, do we exit? Do I sell this thing? Literally, what is the limit of my business? So everyone's in a different position for their business. And everyone is experiencing their business journey in a different way. Now, in some cases, there are similarities no matter where you are. I think that having strong moral principles and a strong moral foundation for how you do business, some people can call it an ethical foundation, where being honest with your customers, doing right by your customers, being candid and direct when things aren't going well. All of these things are just great rules to live by even despite wherever your business is in its life cycle. But understand for a second that, let's say you are a business owner who you just started your business, you don't really know what to do. And on a whim, you decide you don't have any customers, you decide to write a book. You have all this free time. So you're like, I'm going to write a book on my journey. So you write it, and bam, through a stroke of the right timing, the right connections, luck, what have you, this book takes off and your business takes off with it and you get all these customers. It would be a mistake then to take that concept and for every new business owner to say, hey, you got to write a book. That's the way to do it. Someone spending their time and attention writing a book when they have no business doing so could be doing one of the worst possible things that they could be doing. Yet what often happens is what gets shared on social media are these contextless situations, these general scenarios where someone says, "Oh, it's easy, just do this. Oh, just do this. It's all you got to do." And then you find yourself frustrated as a business owner because you're doing those things and they're not working. When good advice was really young, man, I was spending so much money. I mean, I was burning through cash so fast. And I had a guy who had been in the game much longer than me who was essentially like, hey, just run ads, just run more ads. And I was running ads and they weren't converting. I wasn't making any money on them. I don't think I made a single sale on those ads. And when they weren't working, I was going back to him and he was like, "Oh, you gotta increase your ad budget. Like you're not spending enough money." It's like that scene in Dope Sick where like something's not working when it's something is wrong. And they're like, you gotta up your dosage. It's not that there's anything wrong with it. You gotta take more of it. And I remember he was like, "Man, you gotta spend more money. That's why it's not working." So I spent more money. And unfortunately, I spent several $1,000s on advertising, realizing that I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was selling. And these ads very simply weren't converting. I bring this up because I think many of us are looking for that competitive edge in our business. We're trying to figure out, what is the lever I need to pull that is going to create real momentum in my business? We're looking at people who've done it before. We're looking to people who have the success that we want, and we're trying to emulate those people. And unfortunately, sometimes those people are telling a fraction of the story rather than the whole story. So there was a guy who was a multi-million dollar business owner who I had known for a while. I had known his story. And he basically made this post on Facebook one day that talked about all the success he was having and how he made just one decision 6 months earlier that had unleashed, basically millions of dollars in his business. Well, I had known this guy for a while, and I knew his history. I knew his story. This guy had been in the marketing world, in the branding world for a decade. He had been working on on his business for a long time. And I always thought it was interesting. I wonder why he presented the story as he just started the business and here's all the success he's had from it, rather than sharing the entirety of the struggle and the pain and figuring out what's working and figuring out what's not working. It's kind of like a tired cliche in the social and the influencer world of, I've got it all figured out. I'm the expert. I know the answer. And I can't necessarily show that there are things that I don't know or that I haven't figured out yet. Even though the irony being that by showing those things, you would probably connect with more people, not less, because they would understand and they would, more importantly, they would see the pathway out of their pain because they know that you've actually walked it and you've been there. So, what often happens in the business world is we are looking for that answer. We're looking for that silver bullet. And so, what we do then is we pick up and place other people's very simplistic success methods on our business. And then we get frustrated and wonder, why didn't this work for me? It didn't work for you because your business was not that business. Sometimes there are factors that allow you to emulate what someone else has been through. If they've run a roofing business and they focus on a very specific type of roof in a very specific metro area of a city, and they've scaled the brand and they did it from, a shoestring budget, and you happen to be a roofer who focuses on the exact same type of roof in the exact same type of market, and you're scaling from a shoestring budget, I mean, I would be interested in that story. But instead, what happens is we see the story of the the dude's a plumber. He inherited a plumbing business from his dad that was around for 30 years. He has a LinkedIn about his plumbing business. This is made up, by the way. I'm not thinking of anyone in particular. He has a LinkedIn telling his everyday stories of, kind of just managing the business. It has 40, 50 employees. They kind of run the business and he sort of just, shows up to make sure that everything is working well. Well, it would be insanity then for someone who runs a dog training business to watch those videos or follow that account and who's starting the business themselves from scratch. And when this person says, "Yeah, I just let my employees do everything all day. I just run ads all day," or what have you, it would be a mistake for that person to then think, "Oh, I just need to do that to be successful." Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't good advice out there. It doesn't mean that there aren't things that you can learn from other people. It's that you have to always understand that there's nuance in business. There's nuance in business. There is a very unique context to what you're experiencing with your brand. And honestly, whenever I have these kinds of conversations with my customers, I really try to push back against, just tell me the answer. Just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to, and I don't mean that like in a sense of like where I am coy or avoiding, like, well, you're gonna have to just figure it out. It's when someone says, like, someone might say, "Hey, we're trying to get more sales, so I'm going to dedicate $2,500 a month more to online advertising. Do you think I should do that?" And my answer is never, yes, do that. That works. And my answer is also not, no, you shouldn't do that. It's, okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about your business. Let's talk about the money you've spent so far and the return you've seen on it. Let's talk about the risk to your business. And if you directed that kind of funding, what are you pulling from? What's not getting done? What's not going to happen? Like, these kinds of conversations are the conversations that have to happen for you to have a deeper understanding of what's actually going to work in your business, rather than, oh, just pull that lever, just do that thing. I mean, the number of people who I've seen over the years just try to emulate the thing without thinking about the context. Like, I have this Tuesday morning business meetup group that I've had for 6 years now. And over the years, man, there have been half a dozen other groups that have done groups like this. People who've come to me and said, hey, we're starting a group. We want to do it like your group. Is that okay? Is that cool? And at which I'm always just like, yeah, there's nothing special in my group. Absolutely. Do whatever. And I cannot think of one of them that have made it long-term. And it's not because there's something special about mine. It's just that this is the group that I created based on my circumstances. It's not a widget you can just pick up and drop elsewhere. The same thing is true for the podcast, and that I didn't have any customers when I started Good Advice. So I did a podcast, and I was passionate about the podcast, and it's been great for my business. It's been incredible for my brand, but it doesn't mean that everyone should start a podcast. It doesn't mean that you, the person who hates podcasts, well, I guess I just have to do it. No. Find the thing that works for your context, for your circumstances, that interplays with what your giftings are and your talents are. That's the right timing according to where you are in your business and your brand. Don't follow someone else's random advice, including this podcast, including this video. We gotta start thinking and testing and trying things for ourselves, rather than just trying to copy and emulate and do what someone else is doing. Because, man, when you do it that way, you're really, it's a game of chance. You're just hoping for the best. And that's not a great strategy for business. What worked in one place may not work in your place. It may not work somewhere else. And that's something to live by and think about whenever you're making your strategic decisions. Hey, that's today's Good Advice podcast episode. I so appreciate you tuning in today, and I wish you well on your business journey. If you're a first-time listener, don't forget you can follow the podcast here, or you can also make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast, whether that's on Apple Podcast or Spotify or YouTube or what have you. Thank you so much for listening today. I appreciate all my advertisers and supporters on the show. That's today's Good Advice. We'll see you later.